Hello again off the top. He said, she said. 3 topics, 2 minutes each. Anything goes. There are no taboos. Do you think it's taboo for SeaWorld to have whales? The killer whales are their biggest attraction, but because the whales are in the park, in a tank, trained to do certain things, are they slaves? PETA thinks they are. The animal rights organization filing suit against SeaWorld, claiming the constitutional rights of orca whales have been violated. They cite the 13th Amendment. Slavery has been abolished, and PETA considers the whales slaves. It's the first time anybody has tried to apply the amendment to non-human animals. Our contributors, the editor of Turner's 2 Cents, Cameron Turner, whose column also appears in the Los Angeles Sentinel, and Doctor of Social Ethics, Charlotte Laws. Our pictures are furnished by Skype. Charlotte, I'll start with you. Does PETA have a point, or this time, have they gone too far?
I fully support what PETA's doing. They are enslaved by any definition. They're ripped from their families, they're forced to breed, they're put in very small pools, and they are commodities. They're objects for entertainment and personal gain. And what PETA's doing, it's essentially a publicity stunt, but I don't mean that in a negative way. It's very important to get the publicity by filing the lawsuit in order to get the public awareness and to try to change laws in the future.
So basically, Charlotte, we should shut down SeaWorld and all zoos.
Well, I think so personally. Yes, I do think that. And because I think that animals should also be included in the Constitution. In fact, many countries are way ahead of the United States on this. Switzerland, Germany, Ecuador, and even Turkey is considering it right now. And I think we should also have standing for in court. You know, animals should have standing in court. We have corporations that are persons, but animals, living, breathing beings, do not have standing. And so that's what PETA's trying to do, and I applaud them for what they're doing.
Cameron, what do you think about this?
As human beings, we certainly need to show respect to the other species with whom we share the planet, but there is no correlation between them and us. PETA's lawsuit against SeaWorld demeans the historic reality of slavery and the towering importance of the 13th Amendment. I mean, to equate Shamu and friends to the millions of human beings who were degraded, brutalized, stripped of their culture, and murdered under a racist system of forced servitude, that to me is just, it's beyond insulting. No less insulting, frankly, than if PETA had compared the SeaWorld whales to, say, the victims of Auschwitz or the victims of the Armenian genocide or the Sudanese genocide, the Trail of Tears. Any of these acts of mass evil which have stained human history, there is no comparison between what is happening with the SeaWorld whales and these atrocities of human history. And by making this correlation, yes, it's a PR stunt, but it makes them look silly and insensitive.
But the prejudice against animals is called speciesism, and it's exactly the same thing as racism, sexism, anti-Semitism, any of those other isms. It's really a prejudice where humans are arrogant and think they're superior to other species, and it simply is false.
But I get Cameron's point. To compare it to the abolishment of slavery
And to compare what's happening at SeaWorld and the zoo to what was done to our human ancestors in the slave. I mean, that's preposterous. I'm sorry.
No, I disagree with
there's
you.
no correlation. Maybe on some lofty ethical plane you can draw some thin parallel, but no, these animals are not being brutalized and murdered and so on as the way our human ancestors were. PETA needs to find another way to make their point,
much larger
because they're
numbers.
Undermining the legitimacy of any legitimacy they may have. They're undermining through their means of expressing themselves.
All right, got to move on. Here we go. Now, very little good news when it comes to the economy. It's bad. People are struggling. People are out of work. People on welfare are trying to survive. They had an idea in Florida. Maybe somebody will suggest it in California. No welfare money if you don't pass a drug test. State of Florida ready to go with it. A federal judge temporarily blocked it. Why? They violate the 4th Amendment. The Constitution's ban on unreasonable searches and seizures. A spokesman for Florida Governor Rick Scott said drug testing welfare recipients, just common sense. It's a way to ensure all welfare dollars are used to help children and get parents back to work. In the perfect world, should you have to pass a drug test to get welfare money, Cameron?
Of course not. This is yet another disgraceful example of how a lot of conservatives scapegoat and demonize the poor. Back on May 31st, when Florida Governor Rick Scott signed this horrendous, unconstitutional piece of legislation into law, he declared that it is unfair for Florida taxpayers to subsidize drug addiction, inferring that all low-income people as a group are a bunch of drug addicts who need to be controlled by the state. Ironically, the governor's drug screening program has already proven that the opposite is true. The Florida Department of Children and Families reports that since mid-July, when this program went into effect, 32 welfare applicants have failed the drug test. How many have passed it? 7,000. So clearly there is no pattern of rampant drug abuse among Florida's welfare recipients. In fact, the complete opposite is true. And this thing is unconstitutional, it's unethical, it's gonna get bounced out, just like the Michigan law got thrown out back in 1999.
Charlotte, do you agree with Cameron?
Well, actually, I do agree with you, Cameron. I think it is a discrimination against poor people. And I think if you were going to impose some sort of drug tests, I think you would also have to impose them on people who use any public facility that is paid for by taxpayer dollars, whether it's libraries or parks or FEMA aid or school loans or public restrooms.
Wait a minute. Are you suggesting if you walk into the library, you have to take a drug test?
Well, I think I don't agree with that. I don't agree with any drug test anywhere, but that would be the only fair way if you're going to institute something for people that get welfare. But what's interesting is actually they have something in Sacramento right now. It's AB 730, which they have actually proposed, and it's in committee now, and it's very similar to this Florida law that they're trying to get passed. And basically what happens is that you have to take periodic drug tests, and if you fail, you have to go into a 1-year drug treatment program. And if you don't complete that program, you don't get the welfare money. But I don't really understand why so many states, and there are a bunch of states that are trying to put this law through, because I agree, I do not think it's constitutional, and I don't think it's going to stand up in court.
All right, the two of you agree on that. Here's our final one. If you ride a bike on city streets, you felt like an outcast, like a snail in an elephant's tracks. Los Angeles has tried to protect you with new laws, giving more room and more rights to cyclists. Made a lot of people happy, made a lot of people upset. Cyclists in San Francisco must share the bike lanes with taxi cabs, at least when it comes to picking up and dropping off passengers. City says not being able to use the bike lanes is a safety hazard. Then again, if you're on a bike and all of a sudden a big yellow taxi pulls into your lane, it may be hazardous to you. Drivers' rights versus cyclists' rights. It's an issue that will not go away. Charlotte, if you were queen of the road, how would you solve this problem?
Well, I want to be queen of the bike lane, Fred. But I know you're probably not going to like my answer because I am going to sound like a politician in this answer, but I really believe in compromise. I believe that it needs to be handled on a case-by-case, street-by-street basis where the community comes together and everything is looked at from physical concerns to safety.
You're right. I don't like your answer because your answer is saying nothing. How do you feel about this?
But, I feel both sides have a legitimate claim, and I think that it's a difficult situation. There's no easy answer, and I think it has to be broken down by from street to street.
Charlotte, with all due respect, I can sit here and say that. What do you think? Who deserves more of the road, the cars or the riders?
I don't think that one deserves more than the other. I think it depends on the particular street. But as for the San Francisco situation, I think that is sort of a compromise, except that I think that instead of allowing the cabs to drop off passengers and pick up passengers anywhere in the bike lane, they might want to allow only certain areas of the bike lane so that it doesn't really inconvenience the cabs and the pedestrians, but it's safer for the bikes. That would be my answer, Fred.
All right, great answer. Whatever that meant. Cameron, do you have a straight answer?
This issue really, I think, is resolved by this most recent decision, allowing taxi cabs to enter the bike lane for the purpose of picking up, dropping off passengers. That is a completely reasonable resolution and compromise to this conflict. I mean, it makes perfect sense. If you're a taxi, you're picking people up, dropping them off, handling luggage. You can't be in the street. You need to be up on the curb for safety's sake. And so that is not an unreasonable kind of a thing. I think the cyclists are just really kind of, being a little too militant on this deal. I've got to side with Mark Gruberg. He is the head of the United Taxi Cab Workers of San Francisco. And he said, the city's always talking about sharing the road, but the bicyclists get exclusive access to the bike lanes, and that just goes against that whole mantra. So
a lot of the bicyclists are going onto the sidewalks because they're feeling like their safety is they're worried about it, so they're going on to where the pedestrians are.
All right, no, I think that's fine, Charlotte. And by the way, if you're watching at home right now and you would send in a self-addressed stamped envelope, we'll be happy to send you a decoder ring for what Charlotte meant in her last answer.
Hey, man, can't we all just get along? Bikes and cabs live together. Kumbaya, y'all. Let's have some peace on the streets of San Francisco. Come on.
All right, Kevin, Charlotte, thank you both very much. I'll talk to you guys again soon.
Thanks.
All right.